Welcome back to Student Tutorials. In this video, we're going to be looking at the last of the two scripts you're going to need for the wireless transfer of your thermometer data. And that's the script for the receiver ESP. So the ESP that's going to be plugged into your laptop so you can actually see what's happening. Let's quickly recap what we need to achieve in this script. First, we're going to have to define what data we're going to be receiving. Now, why do we need to do that? Well, if you remember the last video, we had to define a custom structure so that we could send all of our data in one variable. The thing is that the other ESP has not necessarily ever seen that structure before. So we're going to have to define what that structure will look like in the new script so that it can understand what we've sent. We need to make sure that the callback function that we made is run when we receive the data. And then we're going to have to print the data that we've received, obviously, so we can see it. Anyway, let's get into the code, which is a lot simpler than the last one. Okay, so here's the receiver script. You'll notice I don't have all of the other libraries included in there. I only have the two necessary ones, ESP-NOW and Wi-Fi.h, not the temperature ones because it doesn't need that. Anyway, so first thing, like we said, we're going to have to define what data we're receiving. And you might notice that this code here is exactly the same as the code in the other script. And that's because it is. I recommend literally copying and pasting the code that you have in the other script so that there's not really risk of any mistakes. This structure in this other script has to be exactly the same. Otherwise, it will not understand what you are sending to it. And again, okay, next line, again, we're giving that structure, we're assigning that structure to a variable myData. Okay, so now we're going to define a function that's going to run when we get the data. And so we need this function so that we can process the data and also the callback function that we've sent in the previous script. So I'm going to create another void function so it doesn't return anything called OnDataRecv. And it's going to have three parameters, like we sent in the last function. When we send the data, remember there's three different parameters. So there's the MAC address, so that will be the MAC address of this ESP actually. There'll be the incoming data, so that will be the myData variable that we sent. And if you remember, we also sent the length of the size of the data. So we're going to create an integer called len, so it holds the size. And then this line here, this is just a function to copy all that data that we received to memory. So we have it local. So it's just saying mem copy to memory. Then you'll see next in the script, we have serial.println, and it's just going to print every bit of the myData that we receive. So it's going to print the names of each of the thermometers, and then it's going to print the temperature values that it receives from them, which is great, on a separate line. Now, it is worth noting that if you're doing any sort of graphing or work in this variable with this data that you're sending, it's not best to structure it like this. It's best to structure it like I did in Arduino 8, the obtaining data video, as if you're trying to export to a CSV, this is going to be very difficult to get this data. So that just means you have to change it back in the other script and in this script to make sure you're copying the structure. Okay, so that's the structure defined. Then we again have to tell this device, the ESP, that we actually want it to behave as a Wi-Fi station, like we did in the last one. And we've got to use the same function that we did in the last one. We've got to initialize ESP-NOW. And again, it checks if it's okay, and if it's not, it's going to tell us that it's not okay. We then got to register that function, which we made up here. And then that is everything. We don't need anything in the loop, as every time we receive the data from the other ESP, this will automatically run. This OnDataRecv function will automatically run, so we don't need anything in the loop. The ESP will always be checking itself. Anyway, that's it, and so I'm going to send that to the ESP. Let me send that to the ESP. See, it's uploading to CSV, it's writing to the memory. And once it's done, we're going to open a serial monitor and check what it's doing. And you'll see that it's doing nothing. And that's okay here because no data is getting sent. So that is exactly what we'd expect to happen. So we're going to, in the next video, actually demonstrate this working. So we're going to set up the two ESPs, and we're going to show how far the transfer range is and show the temperature sensors actually working. Anyway, thanks for watching.